Hello, everyone. What is going on? Good to see all of you tonight. I was finishing up a conversation with friend of the podcast, Heather Grotman. She's helping me with something, and I deeply appreciate it. And I hope I'm not ruining too much for her, but she does a podcast now, and I will be making an appearance on it sometime in the future. That's up to her when that's going to happen. We've already worked out what we're going to discuss, and I'm all excited about it. Of course, I'm not going to ruin anything here, but just for the last 15, 20 minutes, we were going over a few things that I can't talk about right now. But it's great to see all of you on this July 28th of 2025. As you can see by the title of this live show, I have a fantastic show planned for all of you. We will surely get to those headline items over the next 2 hours. Certainly want all of your inputs. Certainly want your comments and suggestions and questions and insights and everything once we get to those, because I know for at least two of them, you've certainly heard of the disappearance of Tabitha Tutors. And you've certainly heard of the disappearance of Eaton Pats. But I think the murder of Jennifer Servo is a little less well known, but it is could be relevant to what we do here at Unfound for disappearances, and one disappearance in particular, and that will all make sense before we are done tonight. As you are watching / listening tonight, please give this show a thumbs up. If you are not yet a subscriber to this channel, you should think about doing that. And if you'd like to support what we do here at Unfound, you can hit the join button below if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're on Facebook, appreciate it. Maybe you want to go over to YouTube as well. If you are live right here, happening live at 3 after 9 Eastern time on July 28th of 2025. You can hit the super chat button below and contribute that way. Of course, patreon.com/unfound podcast right there on the screen, and paypal.me/unfound podcast. A lot of different ways you can do that. But it's been a beautiful day here today. I think we did get a little rain around here and there, but for the most part, it was pretty nice. And in fact, I think over in Tampa, they hit 100 degrees. The heat index is up there. It's certainly up there. I know once we get until later in the afternoon, when the sun gets over here to my left, which is the west side of the building, and that it starts cooking a little bit over there on my balcony. So you can feel it. You certainly do feel it. Otherwise, I'm pretty good. My dad had got an infection. Talking to my dad today, he had to go to the hospital because he got an infection on his arm. A neighbor's dog had scratched him. It wasn't anything. It was just, but my dad is 88 and he takes medicine that kind of thins out his skin and makes his skin. He has to really watch when he's around things that, you can scrape your skin and everything. Well, the dog scratched him. He didn't think it was any big deal, but it kept getting a little worse over the last couple of days. So I got to go to the hospital. And so he's getting some antibiotics and all of that. And, but I think he's going to be just fine. I think he made a good decision of going there. He sent me a picture of it. And I was like, yeah, good thing you went to the hospital, and maybe we should think about shooting that dog. I was joking. Just joking. Just jokey. I'm not serious, but that is what I texted back to him. So let's see who is in here, and then I'm going to go through what's been going on since we all got together the last time. Charlie, how you doing? I'm guessing by this time that Bration is in Ohio seeing his grandma. Am I right about that? I've not spoken to Diane since maybe last week or something. Hello, D. What's going on? Fishing. What's going on? Love your show. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. And yeah, it's about time. I was on here a little early. Lisa, good evening, Ed. Taking a break from prepping tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner. What? It's not November, but I cook Thanksgiving 3 or 4 times a year. While you are really an overachiever, Lisa. That's really disgusting. I know you're just kind of coming in here and throwing this stuff around, making us all feel, inadequate and stuff. Oh, look at me. I'm just doing a Thanksgiving dinner. Look at me. I see you working, Lisa. Good evening. Yeah, there you go. Hello. For the racer, I can't remember to join on Thursday nights. Well, you got to remember when we do trivia, Lisa. Yeah, you got to do it. Hello, neighborly. What's going on? Charlie, we used to do Thanksgiving themed keg parties in college all school year. I never knew that, Charlie. That's funny. Julie, good to see you. Hey, cats and kittens. Lisa, thanking you. Yes. Lisa, yes, it is coming up on my birthday. Thank you, Lisa. I know I'm joking around. You're very generous. Thank you so much. Wishing you a very happy 55 and have some chicken wings on me. I am going to do chicken wings on Friday. Thank you. And you're looking fantastic for 55 on Friday. You know what, Lisa? I am looking fantastic. You're right. I appreciate that. Yes, be in Ohio. Michael's over there. Okay, so brother Michael went over there to Ohio to see what was going on. Okay, very good. And once again, Lisa, thank you very much. Lisa is correct that I have a birthday coming up this Friday, August 1st. She is also correct that I will be 55. I will be the old speed limit here in the United States. Don't have anything special planned. This will be the first birthday that I'm experiencing, here in Florida. Usually at birthday time is around the time that I've gone to Pennsylvania, even kind of going back, of course, before my mother died, and even before I moved to Florida. It would usually be July. I'd stay over there in Pennsylvania, July into August, really mainly because, my mother would throw these big parties for me with a cake and all this stuff. Of course, I want to experience that. So you got to be in Pennsylvania for that. But of course, as you know, I was already back to see my dad. What is it? It seems like it was just last week, but I got back here before July 4th. So it's been a while. So I was just there. And so this will be the first birthday in a while that I am experiencing here in Florida. And like I said, I got nothing special planned. And as I think some of you already know, I've already talked about it. My brother Brian and his wife are on a long trip. They're not coming back to September. So I'll probably just be spending birthday by myself. It's okay. All right. It's okay. No pity parties for Ed. I'll be fine. No going to the strip clubs. No making it rain. No going, inviting some stripper to the place to do a little dance up for me in my condo. Not doing that. So it'll be real low key. Maybe I'll go to the gun range or something. It's just not gonna be anything crazy. Hello, Jody. What's going on? If everybody doesn't know who Jody is, Jody, of course, is the sister of still missing woman Robin Abrams. Everybody say hi to Jody, who is coming into to the chat from Facebook. Hello, everything. Marky Davis. Marky, I haven't talked to you in so long. I know you've been going through some things, but it's great to see you. We need to catch up, Marky. So, to make sure I don't forget, send me a message on Messenger, and love to catch up with you. So good seeing you in the chat this evening. Wow, what a surprise. That's fantastic. Lisa, Friday, my daughter turned 17. I'm taking her to get a tiny tattoo. Oh my gosh, Lisa. I don't want to, but she wants it, and she's a great kid. Well, kids don't have to always get what they want, Lisa. You should know I'm going to be 55. No tattoos, no piercings. I am not into either of those. Ever. Never, never, ever, never, ever not thought about getting either. I'm just not into it. Not into it, period. Oh, dang, it gave me a minute. I have to go find a birthday party song. All right, D. Yeah, hello. All right, Jody saying hi to everybody. Once again, everybody say hi to Jody. And I got to meet Jody, what was it, 3 years ago, Jody, now? Up there in Illinois when I was up there for the disc golf tournament. That was a good time, Jody. It was great meeting you that day. I think you were there with what? Your son? Is your son there with us? That was a good time. Tattoos help identify the missing. Well, let's not think negative, yeah, let's hope that tattoo is never needed for that reason. Kate Hudson, I'm guessing not the Kate Hudson, but that's okay. Leo's rule, they do rule. Happy birthday. Appreciate everything you did. It is my husband's birthday, and he's also turned 55. Leo's rule, they do everything. All right, everybody, yeah. Your birthday is Leo. You're so great and kind. And I'm going to say this. I think I've stated this before, that there's something, I'm not really into astrology or anything, but there is something. And in fact, who was I telling this to just recently? Who was I talking to about this? I forget. Very recently. But it's amazing how many of women who I've dated who have been also Leos. Dated a woman whose birthday was July 31st. Dated a woman whose birthday was August 4th or 5th, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, somewhere in there. I dated a woman whose birthday is August 7th. I have an ex-girlfriend whose birthday is somewhere around August 11th, 12th, 13th, somewhere in there. It is really... Now, do I have a couple exes that are outside? Yes. An ex-girlfriend whose birthday is October 12th. And then one of my closest women in my life, her birthday is March 1st. So I do stray outside of Leos, but percentage-wise, it is something that, and it's almost to the point where when I meet a woman, it might not even having anything to do with attraction or anything. When I meet a woman, it's almost like I can tell she's a Leo. It's gotten almost to that point. I don't know what it is. Your birthday, yeah, Jody, yes, he just retired from Navy, 20 years of service. Wow, he made Chief. All right, we'll just call him Chief then, Jody. Chief, I love it. Good, happy for him. Now let's see if I forgot to, in preparing for this evening, forgot to pull up the agenda for tonight. Let me get to that. Like I said, I was busy talking to a friend of the podcast, Heather Grotman. She's doing fantastic work over at the lostandfoundblogs.com. So, what is going on? Like I said, birthday. And yes, I will expect to be worshipped on Friday. So start preparing now. Disc golf, working hard, not playing any, not going out to the course, but I have a guy online who's been helping me with my form. I do some videos, send them to him. I think that's going really, really well. Trying to take a very long-term view of it, kind of getting prepared maybe even for next year. So that's going kind of just going back to basics, like stripping everything down because things are not going the way I want it. So might as well start from the beginning. Got up today at 186.8 pounds, still working very slowly my way back down under 180. I got 7-8 pounds to go. Working at that, not totally dismayed by that, but it was not long ago, maybe back in April or May, I was like pretty regularly over 190, which is not good. I need to be down in the 170s and stay there. Just if for nothing but my self-esteem. So there's that. So I'm working at that. And trivia last week, team, as far as points go, came in second. We tied with some other teams. There was tiebreaker. Unfortunately, we didn't do very well in the tiebreaker. So we actually ended up finishing fourth. So there was the team that finished first. There were 3 teams in second place, but those 2 other teams came closer to the tiebreaker guess than we did. So he finished fourth, but we still get all of our points and everything. And that's what counts the most. We had a good night. Some French food questions kind of tripped us up a little bit. We missed a couple of those. And in retrospect, that's really what cost us from winning or at least even tying for first. What are you going to do? But it's going well. This season, we are 4 weeks in. We're in second place overall. I think we've gone like first, fourth, fifth, fourth in the finishing. So we're doing okay. And we're only like 20 points behind first place. And I'm not at all convinced that team is going to be able to stay up there like they have for the rest of the time until the end of September. So those are some of the things that have been going on with me. Did I forget anything? Doing my singing, taking singing lessons online every Friday, and that's certainly going well. Going to weekly now, whereas like before they were just monthly, but I did a lesson like a week and a half ago, and then I had a lesson this past Friday. I'm going to have another one this Friday, and I'm liking it quite a bit. Let's see. Jody says, did a guy contact you yet from Cold Case? He contacted me and I told him how impressed I am with working on Unfound. It's a very important job you do. Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it. Nobody has contacted me, Jody. I'm not even sure what that means. From Cold Case, like the Cold Case division in Illinois, or a show or a YouTube channel. What cold case are you talking about, Jody? But whatever it is, nobody has contacted me about Robin's disappearance. So not sure. Charlie says, damn, I should have been there for the French food question. You probably could have helped. And I even forget what the answers were that we missed, Charlie. One was something that looked like brie. And the other one had something to do with chicken. And we missed that one too. So Julie, really regarding what, Julie? Really regarding what? I'm sorry, I didn't see that right away. Really regarding singing, maybe? So maybe you could type that out and I will answer that. But that's really what's going on with me. Things are working hard. Reaching out to some new people, trying to line up some new people to talk to. Of course, we are coming up on the 9th anniversary of Unfound at the beginning of September, believe it or not. That's crazy. Just a few weeks ago, we went over 500 episodes, and I realized there are some podcasts out there with many more. Like, for example, Generation Y has been around since, 2014 or something. They have a ton of shows. And, of course, there our podcasts that go twice a week, and they're very quick at racking up many, many, many episodes. Happy for them, those overachievers doing more than one a week. But I'm pretty happy that I've gotten it to 500. Who would have thunk it? So happy to be here. And we continue to branch out, and I continue to, of course, I've talked about some things that are going on behind the scenes. And there's certainly one thing I can't talk about right now that I'm working at behind the scenes that just popped up within the last week and a half, where it's kind of another Cameron Remmer situation where I looked at a disappearance and said, I think that more needs to be done here, and I think I'm the person to do it. And so that's what's going on. And I'm talking to this missing woman's, her sister, and her sister's been very supportive, been able to put me in contact with some people. And I'm hopeful that we're going to make some headway. And I think, at least what I can tell, I think because of my experience, I'm bringing a new insight into it. I'm looking at the disappearance in a totally different way. And in fact, when I told the sister what I thought happened in the disappearance, I do not think that her sister had ever been told that before. There are certain ideas that have been going on for some years. And I said, you know what? Those things don't sound very likely to me. I'm not saying they couldn't have happened, but given my experience of now 370 disappearances, that just doesn't sound very likely. And instead, I'm thinking that this is a very possible cause. And like I said, I don't think anybody had ever thought of it before. And maybe if they thought of it, didn't ever mention it to this woman's family. So we're going to see where that goes. And as you know, I don't do sensationalism. You know me when it comes to my theories and things. They're really, really straightforward. And I try to think about what is, of course, most likely, but also not to be simplistic, but what is the most simple answer? What is the theory that has the least moving parts given what we know? That's what I'm usually working toward. And my impression is that everybody that's looked at this disappearance to this point, including the police and others, I think they're just looking at it a little too complex, getting a little too tricky with it, too sensational, and certainly showing that they're really on the fringes of why disappearances happen, where I think I'm right smack in the middle of why disappearances happen. So when I can talk to you about it, I will. That's all I can say for now, because doing work off the record, don't want to put anything out. There's a lot of people to talk to. There's a very important call I'm going to be making within this next week. Once this guy is available, I think he's going to be able to give me a lot of insight about what was going on at the time of the disappearance. And the nice thing is, he's not a suspect. Jody, he said the show, I will message you later with his info. Okay, great. Great, Jody. Thank you. He will. All right, great. I'll be happy to talk to him, Jody. Joel, are you really taking voice lessons? Yeah, I've been doing that for 2.5 years. Online, but just within, just the lessons that are online. But within the last, 2.5 months, I've actually started taking from a teacher connected to this online program. And we do sessions over Zoom. And I had my 4th one this past Friday. Yeah. And Julie, the reason it started is because I woke up one day like 2.5 years ago, and I was suddenly frustrated because I couldn't sing a lot of the songs that I like. A A lot of heavy metal stuff like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Def Leppard, Dawkins, Scorpions, White Snake. I'm from the 80s. What are you going to do? And I just woke up one day and said, I wonder if I can sing like those guys. And so I am 2.5 years into trying to do that. I've not sung publicly for anybody yet. But I've come a long way. Seriously. Long way. And I've taken it very seriously. I practice singing 5 days a week for at least an hour a day. And then on the days that I have off, like Sundays and Mondays, where I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, like for the Think Tank, patreon.com/Unfound podcast, if you want to be a member, where I'm going to be doing a lot of talking in the Think Tank. And of course here, I don't do any practicing. I just do a little song singing and stuff like in the shower, in the car, whatever. But on all those other 5 days, I devote an hour, even an hour and a half a day to practicing my singing. And the woman that I'm taking from, fantastic singer. And she's a rock singer. And so we're kind of in the same way. We like some of the same music. She's like 20 years younger than I am, but kind of liking the same music. And she understands what I'm trying to do and my goals. And, but I can't even tell you how much my voice has expanded. It's certainly improved, not recording artist quality yet, but certainly when it comes to some tone and my range and everything, it's been a little crazy. Still got a ways to go though, but it's been a lot of fun. It's giving me something to do. It's something that's my own. And maybe one of these days I'll show up at karaoke and get some video and post it. One of these days. So there you go. That's what's been going on with me. And Julie, thank you for asking about that. I haven't really talked about my singing much, but I think it's going very well. And it's no different than anything else that whether you're singing or playing a piano or guitar or something, if you want to get to a level that's really good, that doesn't happen overnight. Of course, there are prodigies, singers, and, there'll be singers out there said they've never taken a lesson, everything. It happens. Eddie Van Halen never had any formal lessons or anything. But for most people, they get to be really, really, really good. You got to work at it. And so that's what I'm doing. The good things about my voice is I have a very strong voice. And it doesn't take a lot of air for my voice to be loud, like when I talk. Anybody's been around me knows that. And I've only lost my voice once. That was like back in August. So I think I have some inherent genetic qualities that allow my voice to do a lot of good things, be dynamic. But as far as the singing goes and everything, and the kind that I want to do, which is some of the hardest that any person can do when you're hitting a lot of high notes and holding them and going up and down the scales and all the words and everything, it's a lot different than singing R&B. So I'm challenging myself to do some of the hardest singing out there. All right, let's get to the important items for tonight's live show. And I'm just going to start with the first one, Tabitha Tutors. Now, you're asking, why did you pick that, Ed? Well, I've known about Tabitha's disappearance for a while. And I think, as most people had, I think it's a pretty well-known disappearance here in the United States. Girl goes missing, underage, a little girl, teenager goes missing. That seems to get a lot of attention. And I did look back through my records that at one point, I think I did try to contact her family. I don't know if they never got back to me or who knows. No blame. So I have, but it's looking at, I keep a file on all this stuff. even though, I'm fairly organized. It's probably been at least 5 or 6 years since I tried to contact her family. And how I feel about child disappearances. We've gone through that before. But what put it in my mind is there are a couple Facebook pages that I follow that from, every day put up just random disappearances, and hers popped up. And I was like, well, it's been a while since I read it, looked at it. Since maybe 2017, 2018, when I think I tried contacting her family. So what does my experience tell me now, almost 9 years into doing the podcast? So I'm just going to read not all, but some of the page, the writing, the biography of the disappearance from the Charlie Project. And then I'm going to break it down a little bit and just analyze it, not doing too much theorizing, but just what my experience tells me after 9 years. So Tabitha was last seen by family at approximately 7 a.m. on April 29th of 2003, when her father woke her up in her home in the 1300 block of Leland Street in Nashville, Tennessee. She was watching television when he went to work. She was supposed to board the school bus at 8 a.m. at 14th and Boscobel Streets. Witnesses saw her walking in that direction. She was reading some papers as she walked and didn't appear to be in a hurry or looking for anyone. Tabitha did not get on the bus and never arrived at Bailey Middle School 2 miles away. Her parents contacted the school that evening when she failed to return home, so she was missing for quite a while before they realized it. When they found out she had been absent from school that day, they reported her missing shortly before 6 p.m. So she was missing for essentially 10 hours before anybody realized it. She did not have a history of running away. Her parents could not think of any reason why she would want to leave her home. She was a straight A student with a perfect attendance record. She was active in the choir at Eastland Baptist Church, and there's no evidence that she had a boyfriend. We'll get to that. She was supposed to go visit Six Flags of America amusement park in Louisville, Kentucky, 2 weeks after she disappeared, and was very excited about the trip. She left behind all her possessions, including clothes, makeup, $20 in cash. Authorities initially treated Tabitha as a runaway, which is stupid, due to her age, but they now believe she was abducted. Her parents and 2 adult siblings were all investigated, and none are being called suspects in her disappearance. A neighborhood boy told police he saw Tabitha get into a red car with a man on the morning of her disappearance. He described the driver as African-American, 30 to 40 years old, wearing a baseball hat. The witnesses stated once Tabitha, the witness, singular, stated once Tabitha was inside the vehicle, it reversed course and headed back up the hill. I want you to know I've not looked at a Google map for any of this. The boy's story has not been confirmed, and some investigators doubt his credibility, but tracker dogs traced Tabitha's scent along a route similar to the one described by the witness. The dogs eventually traced her scent into an alley, a place Tabitha's friends said she would never have gone alone. Tabitha's sister, former boyfriend, matches the description of the driver. He drove a red car, but they've never been able, and he knew where and when Tabitha took the bus to school each morning, but police have never been able to connect him to her disappearance. Her parents stated they did not believe she would have willingly gotten into a car with anyone other than a family member. A piece of paper found in Tabitha's room after her disappearance may have some connection to her case. The paper reads in Tabitha's handwriting, TDT, which her initials, I didn't write down what her middle name is, Tabitha D. Tutors, and MTL. And so it looks, like, boyfriend, girlfriend, I don't care. But, when you write something like that, so initials and an N in the middle, like, hey, we're a couple. That was written, what was written. Also found was a business card with Tabitha's name, address, phone number, and the notations, call me and sexy girl, the latter of which was crossed out and rewritten as ghetto girl. The card turned out to have been given to Tabitha by a friend, though, and had no connection to her disappearance. Police searched the logs of a computer at the local public library, where Tabitha is said to have visited internet chat rooms, but turned up no information pertaining to her disappearance. One of you asked, how old was she? Let me check that very quickly because I did not write that. She was 13 and she would be 35 now. Her birthday is February 15th of 1990. So she would be 35 now. She was about 5 feet tall, between 90 and 100 pounds, wearing a light blue shirt, mud jeans, and Reebok sneakers. So, now, of course, what comes to my mind first is we kind of just covered a disappearance like this not long ago, although of a girl a few years older, and I think it means something. We covered the disappearance of Tiffany Reed. You might remember that her sister was the guest. Tiffany was 16 when she went missing, and you might remember that Tiffany asked her sister for a ride. Her sister said, "No, I'm tired." And the school really was right down the street, in contrast to Tabitha, who, a couple miles away. She certainly, I guess there are kids that walk 2 miles to school, but there was a bus a lot farther away from the school than Tiffany was to her school. And I did a map video for that. But Tiffany asked for a ride. Her sister said, "I think you can walk." And Tiffany was never seen again. Now, you should know that a listener came to me through email with a very interesting theory regarding Tiffany's disappearance that I will admit did not first occur to me, but I've talked to him back and forth a few times, and I'll just leave it at that. But it kind of does go along with my general idea with Tiffany's disappearance, that it was an adult figure who she knew who picked her up. Now, a little different, what he's talking about, this listener's talking about, a little different than what I was thinking about, but I think it's still kind of in the same general vein. But, the way I look at a 16-year-old girl is different than I look at a 13-year-old girl. Of course, there's a lot of maturity differences generally between a 13-year-old like Tabitha and a 16-year-old like Tiffany. Mainly being, 16-year-olds usually are going to be, at that point, a lot bigger, faster. And on top of that, maybe be a little more street smart, worldly smart than a 13-year-old. My impression, to remind all of you, I don't have kids. But when I look back at my teenage years, even though I grew up in Leechburg, Pennsylvania, which it wasn't exactly, the mean streets, there was a world of difference between me being 13 and me being 16. Of course, at 16, I was driving, and my parents gave me a lot of freedom as far as where I could drive and all of these things. Loads of difference between that and a 13-year-old. So I think this is something we have to think about. But still, Tiffany going to school, doesn't get there, goes missing. Tabitha going to school, doesn't get there, goes missing. Now, you should know, in just doing some reading on it, that they did take a look at the father. Obviously, that didn't go anywhere. I don't even know if Tabitha's father is still alive or not, but not being connected to her disappearance in any way. I have no knowledge that he's ever been charged with anything regarding children or anything like that over all these years. Maybe he has. I will admit I didn't look that up, but in just reading what I could and preparing for tonight, I didn't see any allegations of that. But on the other hand, anytime you find out that a child was home with a parent And then, the parent says, well, I left and she was still there. And then the child goes missing. We know what we automatically think. That doesn't mean we're right. But it's something to think about. And on top of the fact, there are disappearances that have happened that way, where parents have caused their child's disappearances. In fact, it's a very common thing. What I would want to know, though, was that the usual pattern of what went on in that house all the time? Was this usually how it was, where everybody's gone and Tabitha's there by herself, and then it's up to her to leave at the right time to get to the bus to get to school? I'm guessing this has been looked into. Somebody who knows the disappearance much more than I do, but this is something that comes to mind. I think that would have to really know, was this the usual pattern of how things went from day to day when school was in session? Now, if I find out that this was a unique morning, something was going on, or then we have to start thinking about maybe it was somebody under that roof. But if you tell me that this was just like a morning like any other, then I think that the odds of somebody being under that roof that caused her disappearance drop dramatically. We might even look at a situation like Jason Jolkowski, kind of the same thing, walking to school, they'll get to get picked up from work, and he goes missing. Well, there was uniqueness about that. That's the first time he ever did that. His car was in the shop. He might have walked to that school when he was actually going to school there, but he's walking there for work. And so that's something to consider. When we start hearing about things that are out of the normal pattern for a family, for a group, for a missing person, whether it's a child or adult. But I think we also have to remember it doesn't take necessarily a parent for a child to go missing. We maybe look back at Tiffany Reed's disappearance once again. There's nobody alleging that anybody under that roof had anything to do with her disappearance. The sister or anybody else. Surely her sister had nothing to do with her disappearance. And surely her sister, being under that roof, would have known if something went on in that house where somebody harmed Tiffany. That did not happen. So what I'm saying is, just because a child disappears doesn't mean a parent is necessarily involved. And children can go missing even though there are adults in the house, and it has nothing to do with the adults in the house. So we just have to keep that in mind. It showed that Tiffany Reed showed us that girls can leave and disappear without family being involved necessarily in that girl's disappearance. Moving on, the dogs, what they sniffed, as you would think, that doesn't mean crap to me. It's like it never happened. I think there is so much confirmation bias that goes in with these dog handlers. I know that, although I've not gotten any hate mail from any dog handlers ever, but they're in the business of wanting to be called out over and over and again. So they have to show that their dogs actually know what they're doing. So what do? They find out what the disappearance was, and then they come up with their most, I think, what's a common scenario, and somehow they get the dogs to go along with that scenario. And I don't think these dogs are following any sense at all. There you go. I said it. So I don't pay any attention to the dogs at all. Hello, Rockford. Good to see you tonight. I'm familiar with the Tudors case. Two sisters' boyfriend is an interesting theory. No reported struggle or commotion in an urban area. Good chance she went off with somebody she knew. Going to get to that. Thank you, Rockford. Good to see you tonight. I hope you're doing well. And I always enjoy our emails back and forth about missing persons and other things. Hello, everything. So regarding, being that Rockford just brought it up, the sister's boyfriend, my general impression that if the sister's boyfriend, and I'm guessing, to go back to the description, I guess this guy was in his, the description, he was in his 30s to 40s. So Sam was 13. Did she have a sister that was that much older than she was, that was dating a guy in 30s or 40s, or was her sister 18 dating a 30 to 40-year-old? I don't know. I'm sure somebody knows out there. You can put it in the comments section. But in any case, whatever it may be, this is one of those disappearances that if I think that the boyfriend did it, and, you know, they have this alleged witness, this would have been solved by now. Hello, everything. Hello. Yeah. Hi. Hi, everything. I think this would have been solved by now. It seems, it's one of those pieces of information that maybe just sounds a little too convenient. I'm not saying this boy, whoever saw this, had something to do with her disappearance. I don't know anything about this kid. He could be 11 for all I know. I don't know. But I think if it was, they would have said, they'd go ask him and he'd have an alibi. And I think that if his alibi were shaky, it would be known. But it even says in this write-up, and Megan over at the Charlie Project, there are mistakes on her site, but she gets most things right. The boy's story has not been confirmed. The boy's story is the one about the car coming by and this guy maybe being this sister's ex or something. But the investigators doubt this kid's credibility. So we don't even know if that happened. It could have been the wrong day. It very well may be that the boy walked by the Tudors' house before and saw that guy in that car out there like a week before. And the kid's just throwing some idea out there. We know people do this stuff. And it's really not, it's not necessarily, it's a lie, but not really. He really did see a guy in a car, and it was the boyfriend, but it was on a different day, and Tabitha wasn't even around. We know how this stuff happens. I just get the idea. You know me. I have a lot of criticisms regarding how the police do their work. But I think they could get this one right if that was the case. They would find out who this guy was. They'd find out if his alibi can be substantiated. Was he at work? Was he at home? Was he here? Was he there? They'd look up, does he have a criminal record? All those things. How close did he live to where the Tudors lived? Did he ever have, maybe in talking to the sister, did he ever any reason to be even on that street that morning? It just doesn't sound like this is a thing because the cops don't even take this witness's statement seriously. So it very well could be that this sister's boyfriend or ex or whoever he was wasn't even in the area. And at the very least, he might have been in the area, but it was on a totally different day. So what I would want to know, though, after saying all of that, is what did the sister say about this? It's her boyfriend. She knows him. Does she think it was he? I don't know. That would be interesting for me to know. Maybe it's out there on the Ethernets somewhere. Did she think it was possible that this guy could have picked Tabitha up for some reason or not? And I do have it here. However, what was the timing between the sister breaking up with this guy and Tabitha's disappearance? No. But I'd want to know what the sister had to say about all this. Maybe once again, you say, Rockford, you know very well. Maybe you know that answer and you can put it in the comments for everybody. Moving on, what do I think about this TDT and MTL? So initials M period, T period, L period. Whose ever initials those are, they've never been identified. And I'm sure that they went through like a yearbook. And of course, like they said, they went to this, I guess, to this library where she was getting online. And we have to remember this was back in 2003, when things are a little different than they are now. Could things be covered up as easily? I'm just not quite sure. And in fact, of course, we know now computers can come with browsers which automatically delete your history. And we have all sorts of apps on our phones where we can communicate with people, and the messages are automatically deleted. Videos are automatically deleted. Pictures are automatically deleted, on and on and on and on and on. This stuff didn't exist in 2003. But they went there. They could not find anything that she was communicating with anybody, like online. And there was nothing regarding MTL. And I will tell you, in preparing for tonight, that I was thinking, well, were there any like famous people? Because we have to remember, this is a 13-year-old. This isn't a 26-year-old. And it's not even a 16-year-old. Like I said, I think this matters. That a 13-year-old could, write something like TDT and MTL. Well, that MTL could be some famous person. I don't know of it's no different, at least back in my day, the 1980s, when girls would have posters of John Bon Jovi or Duran Duran, in their bedrooms. And no different than when guys back at the time, maybe going back to the 70s now, had pictures like Ferris Fawcett, or, of course, some of you know that my strange obsession with Bo Derek. Same thing, and you'd write ED and BD, Bo Derek, something like that. That's more likely of a 13-year-old to do with somebody famous than a 16-year-old. The issue, though, is that just in what I could do, a little search that I did, I couldn't find any famous people, men or women, girls or boys, at the time who were famous in 2003 that had the initials MTL. Because we would have to remember that somehow Tabitha would know this person's middle name and starts with a T. How would she know that? It would imply that whoever this was, and it was in her handwriting, she knew this person fairly well. And I will tell you, I like my best friends, from high school or grade school, maybe I could pick their middle names out of, like, if it was multiple choice, there are 4 different answers, I might be able to pick the choice out. Other than that, off the top of my head, it's going to be a little tough. And even when it comes to like my ex-girlfriends, I might be able to pick out a couple of their, middle names, maybe, but maybe not. And in fact, one of my ex-girlfriends has a middle name that I don't know if any other woman in the history of the world has this middle name. So but that's another day. So it would have to be somebody she knew well, but they couldn't find who this person was. So was this something that she just made up? Was she reading like a book? Was she reading some teenager book? Of course, back in my day, it was like The Outsiders or Flowers in the Attic or something. Was she reading some book for kids and there was a character in there with the name initials MTL? Did they ever check that out? Did they look at movies of the time? Did she become infatuated with some character in a movie whose initials were MTL? But what's most important, 22 years later, they have no idea who MTL is. And I guess also importantly, nobody has ever come forward to identify himself or herself as MTL. And I'm guessing that the ex-boyfriend of the sister, his initials are not MTL. So it's a tough one. But I think we just have to remember, it doesn't have to be somebody who is real. And maybe that's, I don't know if they ever looked up fictional people, but it's something that comes to mind. It's no different than boys in 1977 become infatuated with Princess Leia. It's kind of the same thing. Same thing. So that's something that comes to mind regarding that. And then also notable, she wasn't having, as at least it says in the write-up, no problems at school. Whereas, as we all know, even me who doesn't have kids, is when, kids suddenly start showing problems with their work or missing school or having problems with their conduct. This could be an indication that something is not going right in their lives. Could there be abuse happening at home? Are they being bullied? Or maybe they even starting to have some mental health issues. It doesn't seem that Tabitha had any of that going on, which then also makes this disappearance very difficult to analyze. Very difficult, because if we knew those things, then we would know that it was somebody within her orbit, probably adult or child, that had something to do with her disappearance. That we have none of that lowers the odds that it was somebody that she knew that caused her disappearance. But what we also have to remember, though, is random abductions of children happen. They are certainly not as common as, custodial abductions or parents killing their children, or, exes or stepfathers and stepmothers killing children. Certainly not as common as any of that. But random people do come along sometimes and pick people up, pick kids up. In fact, we just had that within the last couple weeks. There was even a video of it. Little kid, boys walking, car just comes by and picks the kid up, abducts the kid. Luckily, the kid was found alive. But it happened just right there. And I don't think that the guy who picked this kid up that even crossed paths before. So I also looked up any, disappearances that might be like hers. Well, I did find one. There was a girl, a black girl. I think she might have been a couple years younger than Tabitha, who went missing 4 years before that, I think in 1999. Kind of the same thing. Walking to school, abducted in the same county. Could be something. That's still unsolved. I looked it up. Could be something, but 4 years difference. Not the same school district, same county, but that's it. Different school district. It might be notable that they're of different races. It's just tough to say. It seems to me that this would be a candidate for a stranger abduction more than many. Let me just stop here for a second, give my voice a rest, see what everybody is saying. D is saying, well, Ed, when I was 18, 19, 20, I dated older guys. Look at you, D. Hey, when I was 25, I was dating a 36-year-old. So, but here it would seem to me that the age range might even be wider than that. Rockford, never heard much about a sister or a relationship. Could be that the cops know who it is, boyfriend or not, and can't prove it. I don't put much weight on her scribblings. All right, Rockford. But is a clue. B-U-T-T is a clue. All right, Julie. Tabitha's dad is still alive. Okay. His name is Bo. Julie, I'm really not following this too well. Sorry. I will next time. All right, Julie. D, but dad went to jail because of it. Okay. So it's difficult to say. There are just a lot of things, and even Rockford, who says that he's followed it, really doesn't know what the sisters had to say about this. I think that's fairly important, because also what's lost is, this is all about the father. Where was the mother? Were they divorced? Did they all live, was it all one big happy family there? Did the father have a new woman in his life who was living there? Like I said, people who know her disappearance really well surely know this. It's just nothing in what I was able to read here. But my biggest issue, if you were to tell me who would you want to talk to first, I'd want to talk to the older sisters. It said she had more than one older sister, right? Whichever one was dating that guy who was allegedly seen nearby, that's the one I would want to talk to. And one of the first questions would be, well, when she went missing, who would you think? Who'd you think did it? And I do ask that. You should know, even though it doesn't often come up in the official interviews, sometimes it does. But certainly when I'm talking to future guests off the record, it's a common question. So when it happened, what did you think happened? In the moment, what did you think happened? And did that change? Has that matured? Has it gotten more complex, more simple? This is always important to me. And so this would be something that I would want to know, that just once again, for the purposes of this live show tonight, is just unknown. Everything says the father left for work and Tabitha was going to, yeah, I read that everything. I set this all up. That's exactly what happened. And like I said, I'd want to know, was that the usual pattern? You know, for all you families out there, I can even remember back in my day, in the 1980s, the pattern of a regular school day morning for me was, before I was mature enough, my mother would come in and wake me up at 5:30 in the morning, and then she'd go back to bed. I would get up, I'd go take a shower, do all that stuff, and I would practice the piano from 6 a.m. until 7:30 a.m. In the meantime, my dad would get up around 6:30 a.m. and around 7 a.m. he would be leaving. My dad was a teacher he in a different school district. He would be leaving for work around 7 a.m. And so I'd see him pull out every day during the school year. So from September to May, that was the pattern. Me getting up at 5:30, my dad getting up at 6:30, him leaving at 7, and then I'd usually leave for school. Once I started driving, maybe I'd leave for school around 8 o'clock, because school back then didn't start till like 20 after 8 or something like that. And then my mother, she might make breakfast, but of course, once I got to a certain age, I'd make my own breakfast. And once my mother went back to bed after waking me up, she might be in bed till 11. I have no idea. So what I would want to know with Tabitha's family, or whoever was living under the roof, what was their usual pattern? Was there anything different about it that day? I don't know. Home life apparently stable with father involved is notable, yet I don't like the absence of family info. Yeah, me neither. We know everything about Asha Degrees and Kyron Norman's family, for example. Yeah. And even though Tabitha's is a well-known disappearance, we don't have that kind of information. So it very well could be things they don't want to talk about. Or maybe not. Her older sister was 21 at the time. Okay. Yes. Okay. So that's Tabitha Tutors. It seems to me that it's more likely to be some sort of stranger abduction than might be in a lot of other child disappearances. We may be looking at like a Jacob Wetterling situation where that guy never saw Jacob before in his life. And in fact, that guy wasn't even intimidated that Jacob was with other two boys at the time. He still went up to them, still abducted Jacob, and still killed him, and still got away with it for 20 years or something. So it happens. So that's Tabitha Tutors. Just still a lot of unknowns here that even like Rockford, who admits he's followed it, doesn't know. Maybe there's something in there. Maybe stuff. There are reasons this stuff isn't known, or it could be nothing. Still seems to me there's a lot of work that could be done there to make more relevant information public to me. Hello, Marty. Marty, the show starts at 9, not at 10 Eastern time. You know that, Marty. Good to see you, Marty. Let's move on to the next person in the headline, and that is Jennifer Servo. My impression is this is a murder, an unsolved murder that is not as well known as Tabitha Tudors' disappearance. What's important to know here starting off is Jennifer Servo was a reporter. She was a TV reporter, and so maybe you already know where I'm going with this. Is there something we can learn about Jennifer Servo's murder that is unsolved that we can learn more about Jody Huisentruit's disappearance? Now, why do I say that? Well, Jennifer, if you were to look at the two of them, kind of look similar. Now, Jennifer Servo was murdered 7 years after Jody went missing, and she was murdered in Abilene, Texas. I think she, what was Jody, 25? Jennifer was 23. And what's also notable is, of course, Jody lived in an apartment complex. So did Jennifer. And Jennifer was eventually found murdered in her apartment where she lived by herself. She was attacked, strangled, and bludgeoned. And I think I also read where her body was eventually found like partially put in the tub. And I think there might have been water actually in the tub. There was no forced entry. Interestingly, there was no sexual assault. She was not raped. And in fact, it didn't even look like whoever killed her even tried to rape her. Of course, there was bruising all over her body, including the genital area, but they could not conclude that the bruising in that genital area had anything to do with this guy attempting to rape her. It just might have been violence just from the violence happening. Very important, but no forced entry. Very important. And unlike Jody, where they realized she was missing very quickly, they didn't realize that Jennifer was dead for 2 days. Somebody finally, well, what's going on with Jennifer? They finally went over there and then found her dead in her apartment. There was somebody who seemingly heard some yelling or something, but nothing that I could find where anybody said, yeah, we heard this big ruckus and banging and all this stuff, even though certainly that did happen within Jennifer's apartment. I don't know what kind of fight she put up, but it does seem that whoever did this did not show up with a weapon. She was not cut or slashed. She was not shot. So whoever did this did not show up with a weapon. Of course, she was strangled, but if it's a guy, of course, an average guy, unfortunately, probably has a pretty good chance of strangling an average woman, average size woman, average strength woman. Could have been done with the hands. Maybe it was done with a sheet or something, but she was strangled. Now, there were 2 suspects in this. One was a guy that she had dated, and they had actually moved in together until she found out that he had a child and a fiance in another state. And so she kicked him out, and it was not necessarily right before she was murdered, but it is stated, and by the way, this whole murder does have its own Wikipedia page if you want to check it out, that about 3 weeks before she was murdered, this guy attempted to get back with her. And at least that's what she told somebody. And she denied that. But on the other hand, there was a letter, a note or something that the military vet's fiance or whoever gave to investigators, because of course they did check this guy out, that said that he was not, he had written this to her well before Jennifer was murdered, that he just wasn't really, he wasn't interested in her anymore. Now, whether he's telling the truth, I don't know. But his alibi was that he was at home sleeping, not the strongest alibi in the world. And it says that police almost charged him, but there were no forensics to connect him to this. And of course, remembering she's a reporter, she's on TV, she could have been stalked by somebody, just like we believe maybe Jody Huisentruit might have been. So this is a guy they checked out and never charged with anything. This murder is still unsolved 22 years later. I don't know what this military vet has done since then. I don't even know if he's still alive. It might be interesting to know that. What if we were to find out that eventually he did have some domestic abuse charges against him, things like that? Then that might be notable. But I think what's important to know here, no matter who did this, is that this was not a person who was worrying about the forensics and everything. It does seem that forensics were left behind. Maybe scratches, under her fingernails, things like that. This was not a sterile crime scene. And in fact, it sounds like it was a mess of a crime scene. So that hasn't gone anywhere. We have to remember, this isn't a disappearance. They know she's dead. They know she was murdered. And still, 22 years later, unsolved, even though they have this guy. Now, there was another guy they looked at, and he was the weatherman at the same station where Jennifer worked. And it was well known that he and Jennifer kind of had a thing going on. For how long? On and off. But something was going on between the two of them. Workplace romance. If she wasn't with this military guy anymore, she struck something up with this weatherman. There are no allegations that he was married or had a fiance. I don't think he was cheating on anybody. And in fact, the evening before, just hours before Jennifer was murdered, she and the weatherman had gone out and done some shopping, gone to eat. And it doesn't seem like, it's hard. Of course, we're all adults here. He says he just dropped her off. I don't know. I guess we're supposed to, I don't know if he's just trying to make it PG or something, but if you have this thing going on and you two go out, you really just dropped her off at an apartment and went home. So they were suspicious of him for obvious reasons, but he claims that when they were out that night that they were being followed. That's what he eventually later told investigators. But I'm just looking at Wikipedia, and like I said, I did some newspaper.com searches for all of this and everything. Doesn't seem like there was a description of a car. Was there one person in the car? Was there two persons in the car? There's no explanations of, well, if they thought they were being followed, why didn't they pull over to the side of the road and try to confront this person who was following them? All we have is, well, we thought we were being followed. Well, did you ever talk about who you thought that might have been? Did Jennifer ever say, well, I think it might be the military guy. It might be John Smith, the military guy. That's not his real name. I didn't write his name down here. It was John Doe that's following us. No news like that. So did this really happen? Did maybe in the conversation, did Jennifer say, just while they were riding around, I thought somebody was following me around a couple days ago, and this weatherman extrapolated it to, oh yeah, we were being followed that night, and he just kind of made something up, maybe just trying to be helpful, or he just completely made the thing up because it's an alibi and he's the one that killed Jennifer. Could be. What's everybody? Flowers in the Attic. Yeah, Julie. Yeah, Flowers in the Attic. Yeah, I remember that book, Julie. I'm old enough to remember that. Everything, Julie. I hope you have a great birthday. I do worry a lot. You still crack me up. Thank you. I try. At least during this live show, I try to be a little more lighthearted than I am on the podcast, Julie. Thank you for noticing. Marty says regarding the military vet, oh, that's a tough alibi. Yeah, well, he might have not done anything. If he knew she was going to be murdered, I'm guessing that he would have had a stronger one. You know, it's one of those things. There's nothing wrong with being home at night and being in bed. That's where most people are. So, Marty, everybody's saying she was followed just because she was on TV. Sounds a little fishy to me. The weatherman said when he was questioned later, he said, yeah, we were out that night. We went here, we went there, and we thought we were being followed. It very well could be they were just being followed because people recognize them from being on TV. We don't know. This is kind of like the Jody Huisentruth thing. She said months before she went missing, somebody was following her. I don't know if that means anything. It very well could have just been somebody who recognized her because she was jogging down the road and said, hey, that's that young woman I see on TV all the time. It would be no different than if I saw Bo Derek, in a mall or somewhere. I think I might follow her too. I have no ill intentions. Rockford, who's a troop vibes, but also check out the murder of media personality Kent Heidhall, which led to 2 wrongful convictions under crazy circumstances, was probably committed by a colleague. Okay, I'll check that out. So I think what's noteworthy that there was no break-in. It does leave the impression it's only one of 2 choices. She knew the person and let him in. It's probably a guy or guys, but at least a guy. Or somehow that person had a key. This could imply if they were living together, did this military vet keep his key? Did he get a copy made before he had to give it back to her? I don't know. Of course, we don't know what kind of lock system they had there. No rape. And I even had a discussion with Julia Cowley some months ago about this very topic. And my impression is that when you have a woman who's been attacked and murdered and there's no rape, that it makes it much more likely that the person who killed her was somebody who knew her. I mean, we really have to start thinking this. What guy gets into this apartment and just goes in to kill her and do nothing else? Whereas, what do we think? We think about the original Night Stalker and all these other cases where men break into women's apartments and houses. They don't just beat the women up, they rape them. Jennifer was not raped. And maybe something happened. Maybe the guy was afraid it was making a lot of noise and somebody might come in. Maybe. A lot of possibilities. But just in general, no rape tells me it was somebody that she knew. That there was no break-in tells me that there was somebody that she knew. It also tells me, usually when I hear this, when there was no rape, this usually means to me this is a guy who has already had sex with the victim before. I realize that rape is not sex. I realize that. But doing that act, this guy has already done that with her before. Usually what I think there are some stats and studies to back that up. So this is kind of what I take away from this. And as I've already told Caroline Lowe, she was familiar with Jennifer Servo's disappearance. And I think I can say that she generally looked into it many years ago. I don't think she'd mind me telling you that. They at findjody.com know about Jennifer Servo's murder and thought, well, could there be a connection? Of course, what would be interesting, what if we were to find out that this military vet lived in the Mason City area in 1995? As an example. What if we were to find out that weatherman lived in the Mason City, Iowa area around 1995? That sure would be interesting to know. I don't know what the facts are on that. But I think what also shows, and this goes back to what I've said about Jody Huisentruth's disappearance, that if it was somebody who knew Jody, the person would have gone up to her door and banged and everything else. Just like this person who probably knew Jennifer went up to her door, got let in and killed her. Whereas strangers, they're not going to go up to doors and start banging because they know they're not going to be let in. They're going to wait down in the parking lot. And that's why I would insist that Jody did not know her attacker. He knew her. She did not know him. Whereas with Jennifer, I'm fairly convinced that it was somebody who knew Jennifer and she knew him. That doesn't mean it has to be this military vet, the ex-boyfriend, or the weatherman. I don't know who else she had in her life. But it's interesting analysis. This is I think the kind of as picky as you need to be when trying to compare crimes committed against women who are in the same profession. They're around the same age. They live in the same kind of apartment complex. They look similar. This is kind of the analysis that you have to do. Marty, I'm just thinking if the weatherman said that the military felt she was probably being followed for being on TV, I think there's more to it. Stephanie, could it also be that the person had an issue and physically couldn't rape her? Could be. So Stephanie's thinking, did the guy have some ED or something like that? Good point. Very, very possible. That's a good one. I have to admit, us guys don't like to think about that stuff, but for purposes of analyzing rapes and murders, I guess we got to talk about it. Certainly possible. Thank you for bringing that up, Stephanie. So that's the murder of Jennifer Servo. Of course, given that this happened in Abilene, Texas, Jody goes missing from Mason City, Iowa. They're nowhere near each other. The odds of them being connected aren't very good. Still, at least for those two guys mentioned here, I'd like to know where they were in 1995. And, if you're going to say, well, if it has to be one of those two, which one would you pick? I guess I just have to pick the military vet guy. I don't know either one of these guys. I don't even know what their names are. Maybe they're out there somewhere. Maybe I did read it. I didn't put it in my notes. But he couldn't have been too happy. Of course, he was trying to, build up his own harem of women, and Jennifer got in the way of that. And I have a particular opinion about guys who try to do that in the first place anyway. Those aren't very good guys, and I'm not trying to be a moralist here or anything, but you have a child, you have a fiance, and here you're living two separate lives. I mean, come on, man. So he couldn't have been too happy about that. And if he was stalking her and he saw her out with another guy, just lost his mind. On the other hand, but the weatherman he's the guy that was last with her. He has this story about being followed, but it doesn't seem like they did anything about it, which seems unusual to me. I have to admit that if I was out with a woman and we're getting followed for some reason, I'm going to do something. I'm not going to get violent. I'm going to pull my gun or anything, because that would be illegal. But I might pull over to the side of the road and see if that person goes by, try to get a license plate number, there's a lot of things you can do. Now, granted, back then with phones, you couldn't take pictures or anything. These days you have a lot more options. But it wouldn't just be, me driving the woman home and then me just saying to her, hey, that was really weird how we were followed tonight. So both these guys are suspicious, but if I had to pick one, I'd pick the military vet. But I'm not that confident. It's also one of those things where you'd think, being that it is a murder and it's not a disappearance, that we know police like to blow them off, This is a murder of a woman that many people know. They're going to work hard on it. You'd think if either the military vet or the weatherman did it, they would have been able to prove that. And I know about the alibi, but still, I'd be going to talk to his friends. Was he still obsessing on Jennifer? Was he keeping pictures of her around? Was he mentioning her in conversations? Were there times when you wouldn't be able to reach him? And here he is. They said they were going to, police almost charged him. I don't know. So that's Jennifer Servo. Marty, he just dropped her off. You're on your own. Haha. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. The weatherman dropped her off, even though he says they're being followed. I mean, you're just going to leave her walk up to her place by herself. You're not worried that this guy is maybe after her. Good point, Marty. All right, let's move on to Eaton Pats. This boy, 6-year-old who went missing in New York City 45 years ago. And I realize some of you know this disappearance. It is a disappearance very well. There is, with Tabitha and Jennifer, there's no new news. There is news here. The man imprisoned for kidnapping and murdering a 6-year-old boy in New York City nearly 45 years ago has had his conviction overturned. 64-year-old Pedro Hernandez has been serving 25 years to life in prison after being convicted in 2017 of the killing of Etan Patz in 1979. Patz vanished on the first day he was allowed to walk to school, the school bus stop, by himself on May 25th, 1979. I guess this is the theme tonight. He was one of the first missing children to be pictured on a milk carton in a case that drew national attention, just like Janelle Matthews. On the morning of May 25th, 1979, the first grader was granted permission from his parents to walk alone to the bus stop, located just a block and a half away from where the family lived. His mother took him downstairs and watched him walk into the distance. He was never seen again. At the time of Patz's disappearance, Hernandez was working at a convenience shop as a teenager in the child's downtown Manhattan neighborhood. He initially spoke with authorities as they were canvassing for the child, but he did not become a suspect until police received a 2012 tip. So 33 years after, revealing that Hernandez had previously made remarks about killing a child in New York, but had not mentioned Patz by name. Hernandez was arrested in 2012 and ultimately confessed to the crime after 7 hours of questioning, telling investigators he had lured Patz into the store's basement with a promise of giving him a soda. Once inside, Hernandez said he had choked the child because something just took over me, before putting Patz, who Hernandez said was still alive, inside a box and leaving it outside in the pile of trash. However, Hernandez's lawyers insisted the confession was the result of a mental illness that caused their client to misinterpret his imagination from reality. The attorneys also pointed to Hernandez's very low IQ. Several factors likely contributed to his confession, including low IQ, mental illness, and heightened suggestibility. Jonathan Alpert, psychotherapist and author of Therapy Nation, told Fox News Digital. These make someone more prone to internalizing guilt or fabricating details to meet perceived expectations, kind of like John Mark Carr for John Benet Ramsey. Alpert has not treated any of the individuals involved in the case. Hernandez was initially tried in New York State court twice, with the first trial ending in a jury deadlock in 2015, before an appeal transferred the case into federal court. At the time, prosecutors claimed that Hernandez was faking or exaggerating his illness, pointing to Hernandez reportedly admitting to the crimes before police read him his rights and began recording their interview in 2012. He went on to repeat his confession at least twice while being recorded. The confession ultimately led to questions from jurors during their 9 days of deliberations, with a final inquiry revolving around whether they were required to rule out the two recorded confessions if they were to determine that the first one was invalid, with the judge telling them they were not. The court's decision to overturn Hernandez's conviction and grant him a new trial raises questions regarding mental health and confessions in court cases. As Alpert points to the frequent susceptibility of individuals with mental health disorders to have an intense need to gain approval from authority figures. The case garnered national attention, with Patz's photo being one of the first to be circulated on milk cartons throughout the country. His parents spent decades in the same home and with the same phone number in hopes of their son eventually returning to them. Child's family worked to help establish a national missing children hotline and pioneered a new way for law enforcement agencies throughout the country to distribute information regarding such cases. For more than 13 years, Pedro Hernandez has been in prison for a crime he did not commit, and based on a conviction that the Second Circuit has now made clear was obtained in clear violation of the law. Hernandez's lawyer, Harvey Fishbein, said in his statement, "We are grateful the court has now given Pedro a chance to get his life back, and we call upon the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to drop these misguided charges and focus their efforts where they belong on finding those actually responsible for the disappearance of Eaton Pats." The Manhattan District Attorney's Office did not respond to calls. So what do I think about this? First, this is breaking news. This is just not me doing analysis. I know many of you know about this case. It's a very, very well-known missing child's case in the United States, maybe one of the best known. Of course, John Benet Ramsey was a murder, but of disappearances of children, this has to be one of the best known, especially considering that it happened in the United States' largest city, New York City. And it is one of those disappearances where, the kid's here, the kid's not here. Did he get beamed up to a UFO? I will tell you what my disappearance experience tells me is that this guy did not do it. I don't know him. I've never seen any interviews with him, mental illness or not, but that he's just freely talking about murdering a child, whether it was one day later or 30 years later, makes it less likely to me that he did anything. Even though we hear a lot about prisoners coming forward. Yeah, I heard this other guy said he killed that kid who killed that woman. We hear a lot about this, and you know what I personally think of that stuff. I don't believe any of it. I'm not saying there's never been some sort of talk in a jail that has led to a murder being solved. I'm sure it's happened at least once. But I have to believe it's not very common. And we can just Google it and find how many claims that people in jail know where there are dead bodies, and they'll happily send police all over the countryside, in my opinion, to make the police look stupid. In fact, it's very much when it comes to disappearances for me, it's very much the opposite. That if I hear, like we do sometimes when it comes to like drug cases or, street crime types of disappearances, we might call them, or that the more I hear about people claiming that they did something to the missing person, the more I'm likely to believe they didn't do anything. Why would you do that? The only way you would do that, reason you would do that, is it helps your street cred. And if the police really, really came calling and say, "Hey, John Smith, I heard you killed Jane Doe. I heard you caused her disappearance," that John Smith is going to provide information that he didn't do it. Now, he's not going to do that out in public. He's going to allow them to, take him down to the interrogation room. And in the privacy of that room where nothing ever gets out, he's going to say, "You know what? You can check this out. I was just talking big. Here's where I was. Here's the people who approved that I was there, and I had nothing to do with that disappearance." But then though, when this guy gets back out in the street and goes back, to talk to all his criminal friends, what does the guy say? "Oh, they got nothing on me. I didn't roll over. I didn't do anything. They don't, I killed that person. They got nothing on me, and I'm going to get away with it. And they're so stupid." But in the privacy of an interrogation room, I'm pretty sure these people just say, "Yeah, I didn't do anything. here are the facts of it. And that's why these people don't go to jail. But on the street, they'll act like the biggest badasses in the world. I'm convinced of that. I'm also convinced that the people who are suspects in these disappearances never tell anybody. It's completely flipped of the way I think the public really think about these things. You have to remember, there's not a lot we can go on when it comes to disappearances. It's very much up in the air. There's usually no proof of violence. There's no proof that a crime was committed. Nothing. But here's what I'm sure about one thing. If a disappearance was foul play, the person or those people want to get away with it. You know how you get away with a crime? Don't talk about it. Now, very well may be that DNA catches you or video catches you or something else, but you don't admit it to it. You just don't go walking down Main Street saying, yeah, I caused the disappearance of Jane Doe. The only way you do that is if you know you didn't do it. So when it comes to this guy, to me, he sounds like another John Mark Carr. Mental health issues, guilt issues, whatever else is going on up in that head of his. And in addition to that, it very well may be when he brought it, he's just a big talker. It very well may be that, he's a guy that maybe can't defend himself that well or something. And then he starts talking about how he's, killed a little boy and I'd do it again. And I've killed others and I've killed, and then Eaton gets just thrown in there because the guy's just making stuff up because maybe he's afraid somebody is going to do something to him. And he's afraid, he's kind of saying, don't do that because I've done this in the past. And it could be totally BS. Now, did somebody do something to Eaton? Of course. And it is noteworthy to me, what was I just saying going back to Tabitha Tutors an hour ago, that there was something unique about this day. And what was it? Eaton was by himself. As it was stated, this was the first day he was allowed to go to the bus stop by himself. Now, once again, I've never had kids. But I gotta say, allowing a 6-year-old in New York to walk to the bus stop by himself, that seems like a bad choice. Once again, it's one of those things. I'm not saying the parents did it, but this seems like a really bad choice. If this is Leechburg, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, okay. Although Leechburg's a little rougher town than when I was there. If this is hometown USA, where they, everybody's driving a Chevy and they serve apple pie and all of that stuff, then okay. A 6-year-old might be able to walk down the street to the bus stop. But this seems like a bad choice. I'm more inclined to think what happened is that somebody had been eyeing Eaton for a while. Pedophile. Of course, they weren't keeping track of those types of people back then. That had his eye, might have even just been somebody who when the parent or parents were walking to the bus stop, was like the friendliest person in the world. Oh, there's Eaton. Let me give him a candy bar. Let me do this. Let him do that. And then Eaton shows up by himself. That's where I am at this. Now, this doesn't seem to me to be the Pedro Hernandez, the way he is described here, does not sound like that type of guy. The friendly type, waving, to people as they're going by, hey, what's going on? He seems like a really strange guy. He would be somebody that if they encountered him, the parents did encounter him when they were walking to Eaton, they would avoid the guy. But of course, I am convinced it was somebody on that walk, and it's probably somebody nobody has ever suspected. Pretty convinced. Let's see here. Hey, Marty, Lisa, Rockford. Wow, perfect time to my mention of the Highholt murder. Charles Erickson gave a false confession in that case and did everything he could to insert himself into the case. Thank you, Rockford. I love it when Rockford backs me up. Marty, I've always been on the fence about his confession. Yeah, Marty, you're from the area. He apparently had guilt knowledge and was telling everyone in his family for years, even before he turned himself in, that he committed a murder. Marty, that being said, he has severe mental problems, so it could be all made up in his mind. It could be. Could be. Marty. Different times. I can't believe what parents would let their kids do back then, especially being a parent now. It blows my mind, Stephanie. He lived in Manhattan, right? Even if the family wasn't worried about strangers, crossing the street is also dangerous. Yeah. It is. I'm just not convinced of it. And also to say everything. I lured him down into a basement with a soda. I tried to kill him, but he says he wasn't totally dead. So he's admitting that Eaton wasn't totally dead, but he put him in a box and put him out on the sidewalk anyway. That seems like a bad choice if you want to get away with a crime. But my insight didn't do it. He would just not be somebody. Rockford, I've been to Tokyo on several occasions for work, and it's a bit jarring to see little kids walking by themselves to the school in the morning. Yeah, that is something, Rockford. Never been there, but yeah, totally different culture. But I can see why this guy's getting a new trial. It may not go any differently. With Ramsey, all right, Julie's going in. The brother, John Benet Ramsey's brother did it. Okay, Julie's on the record saying that the brother did it. All right, Julie. But they're getting a new trial. He's getting a new trial. We'll see how it goes. And of course, we have to remember that even though this disappearance happened in 1979, the first trial didn't happen until 2015. And so they're going to try this all over again. You know, confession. I realize confessions, they're hard to get around, but like Rockford just wrote out that a lot of false confessions being made. People thinking, well, if I give a confession, it'll let me go. All sorts of things. Just for illogical reasons. Marty, I'm just not convinced it should have been overturned. Not enough evidence to convict, but he was convicted. Not enough evidence to overturn the jury's decision. You may be right about that, Marty. You may be right about that. And I think we do have a pretty strong tradition here in the United States, all mostly overtly so, much to people's detriment, that courts do not like to overturn jury's decisions. That's certainly true, Marty. So maybe this is a surprise. What else do I want to talk about? So though I got to all the stuff in the headlines here. So what else do I want to talk about? Just some things are going on here. I've got about 15 minutes to go. I do have another Panky letter that I'm going to read to you. I think I can read it in total. But we're working on a few things here. I'm still working on the Coast Guard stuff. We are patiently waiting. We sent in a FOIA. Myself, well, really, Eric did it, Assistant Eric. By the way, he's gotten a new job. Very happy for him. I don't know if I'm at liberty to say where he's going to be a professor, but he's taking a new position as a professor at a new university college, and excited. He's excited about it. I'm excited for him. Unfortunately, it's not here in Florida. That would have been pretty cool. but I wish him very, very well. I think he's been a little nervous about that, but I think he's found a new good home for himself. But we are patiently waiting for the FOIA response. We sent in the paperwork. We're trying to get as much as we can on the investigation that the Coast Guard did into the disappearances of Teresa Hickman and Angela Westbury. Some of you know that these two girls who went missing, technically Teresa was overage, so she's a young woman. Angela was 17. These two young women went missing together from Jacksonville, Florida in 1984. This has been like kind of a quote unquote pet disappearances of mine for a very long time. And I'm hoping we're going to get the paperwork about everything that the Coast Guard did to try to figure out what happened to these two, because the story is that they got on a boat over there on the Atlantic side of Florida, up there in the Jacksonville area, and were never seen again. However, the boat itself was eventually seen later in the Cayman Islands. And just want to see how much work was really, what was it? Well, they go missing, they find the boat, but who owned the boat and who was running the boat? And a lot of different questions here, because I'm going to be putting together eventually, as long as we get some good paperwork from the Coast Guard, a series on this, because I've discovered, besides their disappearances, 3 or 4 others that somewhat similar. And in speaking to an investigator at the Coast Guard, it is believed all of these disappearances are connected somehow. And it had everything to do with drugs, mainly cocaine, coming up from the Caribbean into Florida. And it very well even could be, you might remember, well, this sounds kind of familiar with, yeah, we covered a disappearance that surely is going to get recovered in this series of Tony Schwark. Remember him? He went out, was it to the Bahamas to get a boat? Remember, is that ringing a bell? He's from Michigan. He was asked by a guy to go with another guy to the Bahamas to bring the speedboat back to Miami. He was never seen again. The other guy was never seen again. The boat was never seen again. I think that the Coast Guard believes that that was also doing some drug running, which of course was, didn't necessarily come up in the interview that I did with Tony's sister, but you can't help but think about that. Why does somebody need to hire somebody else to go get in the Bahamas? This owner couldn't just go out there himself and get it. Remember, the Bahamas are not really that far off of Florida, and you couldn't take a canoe out there. You wouldn't want to take a bass boat out into the Atlantic Ocean, but a speedboat or something, as long as the weather, you check the weather and it's going to be okay, it's no problem. Fill it up. You're probably going to have enough gas to get back to the Florida mainland. It shouldn't be any problem. One person could do it, as long as you have life jackets and things, and a radio and everything else, just in case. This has always been a big question. So his is probably going to get included in that. And I've run across a few other disappearances that I think are noteworthy. But the mind blower, and I still can't get into it yet, is the additional information that we found out already before we're getting the FOIA information about Teresa's and Angela's disappearances. Because one of the points that I've always made about their disappearances is that, well, they went missing. Well, if they were meeting these guys, you can't find anything on Nameless or anything else of any guys that you can match up with them who also went missing. So it would seem that maybe these guys killed these two girls or women. Well, what I've found out that there were some guys who went missing, and it's just there's really no paperwork showing it. And I know their names, I don't have my notes, but it was a little bit of a mind blower. But it's always going to be in the series. Eric has had extensive conversations with an investigator at the Coast Guard. I've talked to the guy once. Would really like the Coast Guard's assistance in doing this. At least Angela, or at least the Westbury family knows what's going on here. Unfortunately, Teresa's father died of cancer some years ago. I don't know if her mother's still alive. And she has an older sister, but the sister seemingly wants nothing to do with any of it. So we'll do what we can, but I think I think it's going to be something. It's just like, it's kind of like Peggy and Patty McDaniel, that two sisters go missing and there's a murder connected to their disappearance, and everybody in Florida had forgotten about it until I came along. Not to pat myself on the back too hard, but that's true. When I found out about Peggy and Patty McDaniel's disappearances, you could only find the picture of one of them on the internet. That was it. Back, some of you didn't find out about Unfound until years later. I'm telling you, that's true. Peggy and Patty McDaniel, two sisters, go missing. What was it, 1981 or early 80s? Or maybe it was 1979, somewhere in there, very long time ago, over 40 years ago. And there's a murder, an unsolved murder in Pompano Beach that's surely connected to their disappearances. Everybody forgot about all of it. This is kind of the way these two disappearances of these young women strikes me. Although they might find a blog or something on their disappearances, not one YouTube channel, not one podcast, not featured on Disappeared, nothing. Hard to understand. So we'll do our best. So that's something I'm working on. Let me read this Steve Panky letter that's dated July 14th, 2025. Hi, it says, let me get in. Hi, Ed. In the interest of justice, I need fact check help. My 2022 40-year-old circumstantial cold case conviction is based on my ex-wife's unsubstantiated testimony. Remember, his ex-wife died last year. There is no supporting evidence I am innocent. My ex-wife's testimony can be proven false by the following two fact checkers. Well, one of these is not going to be able to be done. I'll get to it. But the first one, he says, get my late father's credit card records for December of 1984. Destroys my ex-wife's unsubstantiated testimony. First of all, for that, I don't even know how you go back and get credit card information from over 40 years ago. Maybe you can, but this second one you surely cannot do. And I will have to explain this to Steve in a letter. Also says, check satellite photos of 6036 West 10th Street, Greeley, Colorado, from December 20th, 1984 through December 27th of 1984, also destroys my ex-wife's unsubstantiated testimony. Here's what I can tell you. There's no satellite photos of that from 1984. I'm going to have to tell Steve that. I don't know if he realizes that or not. There are no satellite photos of the United States from 1984 that you could, maybe there are spy photos or something, but we're never going to get our hands on that. Certainly, we had the lens and capability and everything, but anybody who has used Google Earth or Google Earth Pro knows that really satellite photos really only go back to like the mid 90s, and at least the ones that are public are not very high quality, because I've done that. So to go back to 1984, And to think that that kind of stuff would be available, maybe it is in a library somewhere, but I just don't think that's possible. I just don't think that is possible. Maybe the credit, surely the credit card is more probable than getting satellite photos from 1984, because you could do it for yourself. Like, of course, you can download Google Earth Pro, which is free, and use it, and you could do historical imagery. You start getting back into the 90s, those pictures really, really, really start stinking. And I'm not saying, certainly we've used satellite photos, for example, in the 1970s. But when we start talking about like the war in Vietnam, when they were taking pictures, those pictures weren't being taken by satellites. Those were being taken by spy planes like the U-2 or the SR-71. They weren't being taken, planes that were well outside the range of missiles of the time. Those weren't satellite photos. No different when we go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that was all YouTube stuff. Those planes flying at like 70,000, 80,000 feet taking pictures. Those aren't satellite photos. And we didn't have spy planes flying over the United States taking pictures of every square foot of it back in the 1980s. So there's that. I'm going to have to tell Steve that. But that's the letter that he wrote. Derek says it's possible to take a ferry from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini. Takes an hour and a half. There you go. Thank you, Derek. Rockford, even the detective who investigated the case decades earlier didn't remember the McDaniels girls. That's as cold as a case. That's right. I called him. He didn't even remember. It's disgusting. That's right. That happened. One day when I was talking to Joyce, their mother, and she told me something new. And I was so ticked off. I went to one of my databases, tracked down that guy, tracked down his phone number, and I just called him. Very, very, one of the rare times I've done something like that. And I got him on the phone, and I told him who I was. Didn't even remember him. I have him. You can find newspapers.com articles from back then. He's quoted of being interviewed about their disappearances. No, he doesn't. Maybe he has Alzheimer's or dementia or something. I don't know. Didn't even remember it. No, Don, that's what I think. All right. And Amy's just getting here with 3 minutes left. All right, Amy, I know you're usually in early, so that's okay. So I think that is all I have for tonight. Just a couple minutes left. Maybe of course, this past Friday, the Tanova Ross disappearance, and I had a poll going on there. For the most part, in the think tank, people decided that she walked off and is deceased and just hasn't been found yet. Very sad. Very sad yet. And I do want to tell you that there were some things that Tamara and I just couldn't talk about. You know how I feel about things that are said and how, talking about rumors only begets more rumors. We got into it as much as I wanted to at the end of that interview. They're just things that Tamara is really sure are true, and I'm not as sure, and I just couldn't allow some of those things to come in. Tamara's not mad about it or anything, but just suffice to say, there's some things that are seemingly facts. I'm not sure the facts. She thinks they're facts. I'm not sure. So just so you know. But in the group, the number one pick got picked up by somebody, and she is deceased 55%. And then at 40%, walked off and died in the nearby area with 40%. In the think tank, it was almost unanimous that she walked off and died in the nearby area. And I have to tell you, at the blog that I write at patreon.com/Unfound podcast, that's essentially what I think too. Now, as far as for this Friday, being that this is my birthday week, I have to admit, I'm kind of taking the week off. But at some point, you will get part 3 of my interview with Jason Blair, where we talk about mental health, the media in general in the 21st century, and true crime. But I am working on some disappearances in the lead up to the anniversary, the 9th anniversary of Unfound's existence. So that's all I got for you. Charlie, thank you so much. Thank you, nephew Charles. You are very generous gift. Thank you so much. Derek, thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. I know probably I'll be seeing you online, Lisa, somewhere on Facebook. That's all I got for you tonight. Thank you, Rockford. Yeah, young man. That's funny. And keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not be victims. Charlie, you can say hi to your older son for me, being that your younger son is in Ohio. And we'll do this all again next Monday. Good night.